with the community he's reaching out to, how he applies the gospel in the places he's going. So, Dan, thanks for taking time with us today.
Hey, Matt, thank you very much for this, too. So I'm Dan Fenco here in New Jersey, and I planted a church called Camino de Fe, Lutheran Church, and we are a bilingual church. And we reach to Spanish-speaking community here in Central Jersey, and we go into communities and we try to share the gospel with them, but also alongside we show deeds of mercy and justice.
So when you're going into a community sharing the gospel, you just launching out a worship service and letting that be the anchor to share the gospel, or are you doing something a little bit different?
Oh, completely different. We tried that. We tried that years ago, and it didn't work. So one of the things that Camino de Fe is known for is that we go to the community rather than opening the doors of Sunday morning and expect people to come. And so we go to a community, we pray about a community, and we go find a need in the community, and then we try to do everything in our power to provide for that need. So you're right. I don't go and say, Jesus loves you and come to church. What we do is we go and say, what is the need? And we provide for that need. So for example, we do workshops on how to get a driver's license. We do workshops on how to buy a house, how to save money. And we provide food. During the shutdown, we open a food pantry and we help families. And so as we do those events, people get to know us. And the idea behind all this is that we build relationships. Because it's easy for us to go and give out food and give out things and then come back and that's it. But what we do is consistency, and we get to know the people. We know their names. We ask for their phone numbers, so then we send out reminders of another events that we do and our sermons. And so, but one of the things that we do also is that as soon as we start our events, the first thing that I say, well, I'm Pastor Dan, and we care about you. First of all, we want you to know Jesus, and we want you to know the love of God, but also we want you to succeed in this country, and we will provide the tools and resources for you to do that.
Well, and I think that's huge that you bring that up, because I think it'd be really easy for somebody to sit and go, they're calling the gospel just justice ministry, right? But really, what you're doing is you're from the outset saying, I am a pastor. We're not just doing this. We're doing this because of Jesus. And then you're taking the opportunity, though, to really contextualize the gospel. You're being the friend when somebody needs a friend. You're being the guide where somebody needs a guide in a new country, trying to figure out life and trying to give their kids the opportunities that they hope for. You really step into that well, and through building that relationship, you then are able to share the gospel in a way where the gospel just kind of makes sense, is kind of what I hear you saying.
Yes, and one of the things that we need to understand is that it takes time. Because we're building relationships. We're not just. This is not a magic trick, right? And so we're building relationships, and over time, they will know that they can trust you, and they will reach out to you. And so I have many stories where, like for example, the shutdown was about 2 years ago, and I got a phone call from someone saying, Pastor Dan, can you come visit me? And that led to a baptism. But it took time.
That's cool.
And it was from 2 years ago. And then for me to continue to be in the community and to send out reminders about, so I don't only send my sermons every week. I send out information that they need, openings for jobs, or where can I find an apartment? Like, recently, I sent one about resources for where you can find food banks in the community. And people get back to me and say, thank you for always thinking of us. And let me tell you, a lot of these families, they do have churches that they go to, But when something comes up, who do they call? They call Pastor Dan. And so, like, for example, there was another church recently that is giving out food, and they're asking for that information as well. And one of the individuals said, "Oh no, Pastor Dan has my phone number."
Wow.
Right? So who do they
That's
trust?
awesome.
Right? And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to build trust, because people will know if you have a ultimate, motive. And for us, it's like, yeah, I'll tell you, I want you to know Jesus, and I want to make sure that you succeed here.
That's huge. And I think too, you alluded to this, but you can unpack this a little bit. We might unpack this in other sections. You tried doing bilingual ministry before in just a different model. So what's different about what did you try before? What's different about how you're doing it now? And why do you feel like you're seeing more traction now than you did the first time?
Right. Yes. Because I use the old model, which is always trying to come back. It's my default, our default, right? So what do we do? I used to be a pastor at this Anglo church, and so what I did is I translated everything into Spanish, and then I said, okay, we're gonna ask people to come here, and we opened the doors on a Sunday evening, and invited people, and well, no one showed up, and then those who showed up, we had some services, but it wasn't engaging because we were just duplicating something that worked for us, and pretty much what I was saying is, I think I know what it's good for you, and this is said, and they were saying, no, that's not what it is. And mainly what it is that we're not reaching out to people who have a church, or we're reaching out to people who don't know Jesus, who have not had a chance to have a relationship with God, who have not been to a church in years, and don't have this rhythm of going to church and this habits. And that's another thing that we need to understand, that to create a habit takes time, right? If I'm expecting them to be on a Sunday evening or a Sunday morning, it's not going to happen tomorrow. It's going to take time for them to be like, oh yes, I have to go to church. But that's, and so that was different. How is that different from what we're doing? Is that because now we're going to them, and we're starting in a different way. We're saying, we love you, we care about you, we want you to succeed. And then we start having conversations, and then the small gatherings in homes, and at the library, at a restaurant, barbecues. So our worship looks a little bit different than what it used to be, in a way that it's not just in one particular place, but it could happen in different places, and we're reaching out to many people as we can.
So this is huge, because we talked about contextualizing the gospel, and now we're getting this opportunity to move into just this idea of listening to the community. And so kind of want to hear from that story, and I kind of want to dig into it a little more, is the first time you did it, you weren't really listening to the community and what the community needed. You just assumed, this is church, let me translate it into the language of the people, and literally just the language of the people, so from English to Spanish. And we'll pick a time slot that works around the existing worship schedule, and that's how we'll do it. And it was, in your estimation, did not work. We'll call it that. Didn't work.
Right, didn't work.
And so the second time, you went about it differently. You were listening to the community, and when you were listening to the community, what were the things you were hearing in the community that caused changes in how you do ministry in that community?
Yeah, so that listening to community is very, very important, because even though I'm from Peru, I grew up in Peru up to when I was 15. Then I came here, so I'll be here 30 years. I'm still learning to know not just my community, but we're in Bernardsville, Flemington, Bound Somerville, and try to, because every community is different. And so, especially in Bernardsville, I thought, well, we're here, people should come, right, in my old setting. But then after listening to community, then I realized, well, they don't have a car, they can drive, And so how they're going to go from where they are to where we are, which is not a far distance, but it is if you don't have a car. So that was the first thing. Okay, so I'm listening and I know, okay, so you don't have a car, so we're going to come to you, right? The other thing was, okay, a lot of these families work 2 jobs, and Sunday is the only day where they can just play or sleep or just do laundry or just do nothing. And so, okay, so Sunday morning doesn't work because, well, everybody's going to do something else. Sunday evening may not work either. And so we try to find other time spots that may work for different families. So that is actually, listening to the community, saying, okay, so who you are, who are you, and how can we meet you there? And that's exactly what Jesus did, right? He left heaven to come to earth and meet us where we are. And so that's what we're trying to do.
And that's so powerful. So before you even talk about changing a worship style, just by listening to the community, even if you didn't change the worship that you were doing, just by listening to the community, you already knew you had to change location and time right off the bat.
Right off the bat.
Otherwise, you wouldn't, and you probably saw why you didn't, get out of the gate the first time. Because you were literally putting more obstacles in the way of people. But listening to the community not only changed the time and location, because it'd be easy to put it that way, but it also actually changed the form in which you conducted worship and connected with the community. What were you hearing in the community that led to you to change the way you thought about doing church?
Right. And so the church that I grew up was very liturgical. And so when my first attempt into doing a Spanish-speaking church, I copied that and I translated into here. And so I knew that didn't work either because, again, they were not used to that. And so now in our worship setting, it's a little bit different. It flows a little bit better. We obviously sing songs, we do the creed, we say the Lord's Prayer, but it flows in a way that it's easier for them to understand. And also the other thing that we recently changed is that rather than me speaking to them for 20 minutes, what we're doing is having a conversation. It kind of follows my sermon style where, I usually have 3 points, but rather than me just speaking, so one of the things that I do is I have everybody, we provide Bibles and let's say we're going to read Genesis 1 and one person reads the first few verses and another person, and then we talk about it. And I make the points of my sermon in there, but I'm not just downloading information to them. I'm having them to have a conversation and that experience with the Word of God, because again, they don't have the time to open the Bibles on their own, or they don't want to do it. And so our time together is part of where we are also helping them engage with the Word of God in that way. So that's also part of listening to where they are, because again, one of my experiences was that I was talking for like 15, 20 minutes and people will, fall asleep. And they will fall asleep. I mean, I get it. They come from work. They're working really hard. Yeah. And so why? And so I try to do other things where they're more engaged and be like, okay, so now I need to be awake because he's going to ask me a question or I have to read the Bible, right?
That's huge. That's huge. So your listening is also allowing you to experiment better with how you do things, because you didn't just come out of the gate the second time going, okay, I heard this, and this. I'm going to do this. It worked perfectly. Let's go. It was still this kind of experiment. Try something, listen. Try something, listen.
Yes, and that's the benefit of church planting, right? And you and I had conversations about that where we can be so flexible. And especially when we're working with smaller groups, especially when we're working with people who has no background in church life or the rhythms the rhythms of church. So it's easier for me to listen and say, okay, we can do this, we can try it, and we'll see how it goes. So far, the conversation aspect of the sermon works for us, and I see people more engaged in the sermon part.
And I think it's really interesting too, and I kind of want to highlight this point and then ask another question, is, you started doing what the church is now called micro church, and even creating a network of micro churches. That's really what Community FA is. But you were doing that before we ever knew what to call it. Right. And it came out not of this model that you're like, this model is going to be the model that's going to, reach the people that I'm trying to reach, but rather in listening to the people that God had called you to, you came about doing church in a way that happened to be something other people were doing, which helps give, some structure and some more ideas and things like that. But it wasn't like you said, this model, this place, we're good. It's this aspect of listening to your community first, and then trying things that kind of leads you to where God wants you to go, which I think is huge. But it wasn't just your style for worship in doing that. Could you share the story of, I think the story of the train station is still probably one of my favorite stories. And I think it's a great example of what it looks like to listen to the community and then to take action in the community.
Right. And so that's our a part of our mission, right? We want to make followers of Jesus, and we want to give them tools and resources for them to engage and be part of the American way of life. And so here in Burnsville, there's a train station, and people usually, a lot of immigrants usually gather there and wait for someone to pick them up and take them to work. It's usually landscapers or construction people that come. And so during the summer, fall, springtime, it's all good because the weather is good. But during the winter time, we noticed that people, I used to go there and hand out water, talk to the guys, and they would say, it gets really cold, and sometimes when it snows, we can't really be here. Is there anything that you can do about? There was a little. There used to be a deli and it closed, and so it closed the waiting area as well. And so they asked me, do you think the waiting area can be open so that we can stay there in the winter time and wait for work? And so, part of the thing that we do is partner with different organizations. So by this time, I already talked to and met the chief of police, the chief of the Office of Emergency Management, the mayor, and different leaders in the community. And so I went and talked to them and said, hey, do you think this can happen? Do you think we can open the waiting area? And they gave me pushback and said, well, someone has to clean it. Someone has to open it and close it. We want to make sure nothing, crazy happens. And so I didn't really expect much that was going to happen out of that. So I talked to the mayor, and she said, well, let me see what I can do. So anyway, a couple of weeks later, I get a phone call from one of the workers there and says, hey, the waiting area is open. And so they were able to go there. And so we have a picture I'll share with you again. And, but it's part of listening to community, right? And the waiting area was open, and they were able to wait inside, be warm, because I think there's heating inside. And so, and just come out when someone stops by. So that's part of the actual listening to the community. And doing anything in your power to do something, to provide for that need, right?
Well, and this is what I love about this story. It's not, you didn't need seminary for that. You simply listen to the community, you saw a simple need, and then you took time to just go to the people you knew you could go to and try. Honestly, with the expectation that, hey, maybe nothing happens, but at least I'm trying to do something. And then God just, kicks those doors open, which is really cool. And so now the community experiences this just, in their eyes, this miracle, like, oh, how great. But on the flip side, and I thought this was so cool about that story too, the mayor and the police chief, especially the police chief, who wants to be able to connect with that community.
Yeah.
But the community, you've learned from listening, really distrusts people in those positions because the countries they come from, they generally can't be trusted. Yeah. And so now you've got this police chief that's really trying to build trust in that community. You've got this community that doesn't really trust, organizations like that. And now you're able to be this man in the middle that helps create restoration and connection in a way that the community is reaching out to you for help now.
Yes, and that's one of the things that I see myself. That's one of the ways that I see myself as a community leader, as a pastor, is to be a bridge between the two communities. Helping the Anglo community understand the Spanish community, but also helping the Spanish community that there are some expectations for living in this particular area, and in that way we're helping both communities, but also we're, like you said, we're restoring trust, but we're building trust between them. So that's one of the things that we're doing.
If you were to give people just a few simple ways that they can start listening to their communities that they're called into, what would you say those ways are?
Right. So for simple ways, volunteer one of organizations in your community, and one of the things that I heard early on from one of the church planters is that be the best volunteer they want. And when you do that, you start listening to the community and see what they're doing and see where they are. One of the things that we do at Camino Fe is we partner with different organizations. And, we've done a lot of things in our communities and people know the things that we do, but we're a small church, And so partnering with other communities, other organizations helps us do that. So the first thing will be partner with an organization and be a volunteer and start listening to community, and then bring folks from your church and volunteer together and see. You don't have to do this by yourself. You don't have to create the wheel again, right? You just go there and say, okay, what can we do? Use your gifts to say, what can we do here? And consistency. The second thing will be consistency. People need to see you all the time. Otherwise, they just know, okay, so they're just coming to give us something and that's it. Yeah. And that's not what we're doing. We want to build relationships with people and create this trust between the community and us. So those things will be awesome to start. And
I think there's something else you said to me that I think is a huge principle that somebody could do anywhere. You talked about just meeting people. How many people do you try to meet in a week just in the community?
This is all my people. My training as a church planter, right? I think it was like what your number was 15 a week.
I think that was our number. I'm not trying to say you. No, we made all our church planners do 15 a week, but I think it was interesting because God, we haven't done Dan and I haven't done church plant training. Like Dan's finished his training a long time ago, but I think we were having a conversation recently, and you were just commenting to me just the power of still being in that rhythm. Like you didn't say, "Hey, I did this for a year. I'm good."
It, right? Yeah, I'm good. No, and to be honest, when I first heard it from you, was like, that doesn't make sense. How is it that I'm going to do this? How is it that I'm going to meet people? And whether you're a church planter or not, I think as believers, our job is to go and make disciples. Our job is to go out into the world, and as we go, right, we make disciples. And so it does make sense to meet people everywhere you go. And so ever since I made it's not a challenge anymore, but I meet people, at least 10 to 12 people a week, and sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. But not saying that that's the number that worked, but like for this week, I met 12 high school students, right? So this is what happened. The school does a camp for kids who are struggling with algebra. So they provide for the teachers, right? The teachers are paid and all that, but they don't have enough funds for lunches, or they would like for the children to have lunches. And so that's where we come in, and we said, we're going to provide lunches. So Monday through Thursday, I go out, make the lunches with my kids and go drop them off. And on Wednesday, yesterday, I have the opportunity to meet them. And so I met the 12 kids, know their names. I have them in my phone, know their phone numbers. I said, I want you to know that after high school, there's another life and that you can succeed. And I want to be here to help you. And I have a group of people behind me that wants to help you. And so, so 12 people I met right there. And then, when I go to coffee shops a lot, and I try to meet people where they are. Last month, I was invited to, and again, this is a camp for college readiness, and boom, 50 kids, right? And I thought, I'm gonna go just the first day, and I'm gonna bring bagels, and that will be it. And I was reminded again that consistency is the key. And this person of peace that we were gonna talk about, he said to me, "Yes, are you coming next week?" And I'm like, I was saying to myself, I wasn't planning to, but now I am. And so I've been there for like 4 weeks, and this Friday will be the last one. But consistency, right? Because you just want to build relationship with people so that you can bring the gospel to them.
I think that's huge, and I love that you add to that consistency. So just getting out and meeting people, being consistent. I also like something I do. I don't know how you track it. Is I will write names in an Evernote, because I'm not always the best with names, but I think it's important to remember names, and kind of I'll remember somebody's story. I'll remember where I saw them. I'll remember a face. So what I do is I just jump in an Evernote, and I've got an Evernote that is kind of organized a little bit, and I'll just write the name down, the date that I met them, a couple things about them so I remember, and that helps me kind of be more accountable to meeting people, but also being able to track that. So I could go back if I see them again, because some of these people are in your regular rhythm, and can have a conversation. We can talk about, things that we've connected on before. And so that just really helps. That's huge. But
let me expand on that real quick. So I use Texting Church, and I keep track of that as well. And so, for example, that's the app that I use to communicate. And so it keeps track of my messages. And for example, like these families sent me a text 6 months ago saying, my cousin was sick. And so then they sent me a text back months later. And so I went back to my text and so let me ask them about their cousin, how they're doing. So then they know that you care about them, because I did pray for the cousin. And I do care for them. And I'm not care. Yeah. But this app can help me, follow up, because, I won't remember otherwise.
Yeah. And another great example of listening to the community, because there's all kinds of like mass marketing email tools and things like that. But what you learned when you were working with your community is the best way to communicate, to be where they already are, is through text. Those other things, while they may be great systems, aren't going to be the right system for the people that you're reaching.
Right. That's another way of listening to the community, because, we're so used to email and sending emails, but for the community that I'm reaching to, is texting. And even further, they use an application called WhatsApp, where they can just, over the internet, they can talk to anyone in their country. And so a lot of them do text me through WhatsApp as well. And so I have to be able to not only have my Texting Church number, but I connected that number to the WhatsApp so that I'm able to connect with them as well. So
I think that's a huge part of engaging the community, and listening to your community. You listen to the community, but then, sometimes we try to build a platform, make them go to the platform that we built, all that kind of stuff. Instead of saying, okay, if I'm listening to the community, part of listening to the community is being on the platform they're on, which I think is huge. Now, Dan, before we end our time, I don't want us to miss the opportunity to talk about this concept of the person of peace and how you've seen that play out in the ministry of Camino de Fe.
Yeah, so we in every community and in every aspect of our ministry, we have someone that we connect with, and that's the person of peace that pretty much aligns with our passion and what we're trying to do. For example, in Burnsville, we're connected with the school district, and we found a person there that it's passionate about helping the Spanish-speaking community, especially young children. And man, the guy is on fire. And so when we met, we clicked, and he's pretty much the door for me to be in that school district. And I tell you a quick story. So
yeah,
right after the pandemic, the shutdown, the schools were still closed and no one was allowed in, just students and teachers. So there's a new teacher that came into town and was hired, and this person of peace connected me with her, and we arranged to meet at the school. So I went in, I rang the bell, I said, "This is Pastor Dan, I have a meeting." So they let me in, and the person of peace met me. And then we started walking down the hallways. Everything's empty because we're still under, sort of like lockdown, and no one is allowed there. And as I'm walking down the hall, we're talking, and then I noticed people, getting out of their rooms and taking a look, and I'm like, oh, someone here, right? And then I hear someone, oh, it's Pastor Dan. We're okay. No one is allowed in the building. Yeah. But hey, it's Pastor Dan. Oh, it's okay. They were checking out to see, because they haven't seen a human being in the building for the past, I don't know how many months. And then there's this guy walking down the hallway, and like, oh, it's Pastor Dan.
But I think that's huge, because that is like the person of peace. Like otherwise, you don't have access in that community. But a person of peace is somebody that opens up a whole community to the gospel. And in your case, your person of peace might be Christian, might not, but it's not about somebody loving or not loving Jesus. It's about somebody the Spirit uses to open up a community.
Another quick story, right? Because you're right. We partnered with different organizations, and they fit our second part of our mission, which is helping those who are in need. And so we have a partnership here in Burnsville with Episcopal Church, right? And so 2 weeks ago, we had a meeting with leaders in the community and church leaders. And I think it was during lunch, one of the council members asked me and the pastor from the Episcopal Church, and he said, well, are you guys doing service together, or are you I know you do the food bank and a lot of work in the community together, but you also worship together. So I didn't say anything, right? Yeah. But the other pastor said, oh, no. Pastor Dan and I, theologically, we're completely opposite. But when it comes to helping the community, we are right there. And that was the best way. I mean, she explained it why, because, I'm always challenging, right? I'm saying, and that's just people giving testimony of what you've already, who you are and what you do. And she's right. We have not done service together, but when it comes to helping the community, oh man, she is passionate about it. We've done so many things here in the community, and helped so many families with rent, with utilities, with food, and so yes, you're right. The person of peace doesn't necessarily need to be a Christian, but it can align with your values and the things that you're trying to do in the community.
That's huge.
But
Well,
it's
Dan,
also an
thank you.
opportunity for you to share the gospel, right?
Yeah. I mean, your person of peace is somebody you can share the gospel to, but like for me, it was my buddy Mitch in Knoxville who, didn't believe anymore, had a bad experience with faith, usually even gave some Christians a hard time, but we just had this connection. We connected over collective soul and music and just, hanging out. We just enjoyed hanging out with each other, And so, but he was one of those guys that just opened up this community of people I got to connect with and hang out with. He was a person of peace in that community. And so person of peace doesn't mean they're connected to Jesus or not connected to Jesus. Maybe they have a desire for the gospel. Maybe they don't, but it's somebody that God uses to just open up, a community. So Dan, thank you. I mean, thank you so much for sharing, and thank you so much for your willingness to just share with us what you all are doing, everything from how you're contextualizing the gospel to how you're listening to the community, how you're engaging with the community, and what a person of peace does look like. Man, I really appreciate the time with you, and just what you're doing is amazing.
Nah, man, I really appreciate the time, and hope that we can encourage more believers to go out and just listen to community and listen to where God is and what God is doing already. That's awesome. That's a big thing. Yeah.
Well, thank you all so much. As you're debriefing this, just think through Dan's story. And remember, it doesn't mean that you have to do it the way that Dan did it. But as you're thinking through the story, what I want you to think through is just, okay, so what would it look like for me to listen to my community? What would it look like for me to contextualize the gospel in my community? What's it going to look like? Do I have a person of peace around me? And so I think Dan's story does a great job of just opening up your mind to what some of those things could be. So keep going. We love what you're doing.
Amen.